Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Scotney versus Motu fight. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. Obviously, this isn't the main event of the card. The main event is, of course, Don Smith returning to Nottingham against Weezer, and it's an interesting main event. But just in my opinion, I thought that this fight was a maybe more possibly contested fight, perhaps a fight in which I feel is going to create quite a lot of entertainment and is perhaps going under the radar a little bit. And I think, to be honest, a lot of Ellie Scotney's career, as well as Motu's as well, has gone under the radar because both of them have been progressing excellently. I mean, Scotney with Matchroom have been pushed, but hasn't been pushed perhaps the same level as somebody like a Sandy Ryan. Perhaps that's just the level of champions in the division hasn't or isn't the same kind of level as the welterweight division. But she's been doing excellent things. She's been fighting against some great champions and been able to beat them, or just great fighters have been able to beat them. Shanika Johnson as a one current champion, and then of course in her last fight, Alefe Burr as well, who was on a great reign fighting out in France, bringing her to the UK and was able to put on an excellent performance. Motu has been kind of in the background in Australian boxing. She's built up a record in which I'll speak about in just a moment, in which is definitely very, very well deserved of a title shot. And like I say, I'll speak a bit more about it all in a moment. But to give the kind of the main overview, Scotney as a fighter is 9-0 with 0 KOs, and Motu is 20-0 with 8 KOs, and this fight is for the IBF, IBO, and WBO World Super Bantamweight titles. Scotland's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Lefebvre Burr, and Motu's last fight was a win via TKO in round 7 versus O'Connell. This is in Scotland's home country of England. Scotney is 26 and Motu is 35. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, I feel like Scotney is still taking very tough opposition and is willing to do so, even with, perhaps Matchroom not being on the best of runs with female fighters as of recent. I mean, they've had Sky Nicholson and Beatrice Ferreira, who have been so far excellent champions and have been looking brilliant every single fight. But we've also had recent losses to Rhiannon Dixon and also Sandy Ryan as well. So for the most part, maybe it's hit and miss to an extent with Matchroom boxers at the moment, and the Sandy Ryan one was a close fight, so perhaps was unfortunate. And it's going to be interesting to see where she goes, because it seems like Mea is probably going to sit around and wait for the winner of Jonas versus Price. And so where does that leave Sandy Ryan? I'm not too sure, but obviously she took the defeat, which was quite a big stage to lose on against Michaela Mayer, and then Rhiannon Dixon losing to Terry Harper. I mean, Terry Harper, I'm not too sure if you actually class her as a matchroom boxer as a still or not, because of what's happened with her, the fights in which she's had. She's often fought with matchroom, so perhaps she's still classed as a matchroom fighter. I'm just not really too sure. But Rhiannon Dixon was a champion who was also winning and building a brand and building a name for herself, and to have that loss was quite detrimental for her career. And so Matchroom are still wanting to put their fighters in with top fighters, with other champions, which is excellent to see. And this fight definitely is that. Perhaps you could maybe argue that Scotney has the capabilities and the potential to be the most skilled female fighter from Matchroom. Of course, like I say, Sky Nicholson, Beatrice Ferreira, just off the top of my head, are two main ones who are looking excellent at the moment and are looking dominating in most of their performances. So there's definitely tough competition, but for the moment, like I say, what she's doing, collecting the belts, is going under the radar, and to have the IBF, if she wins this, the IBO and the WBO, she's just aiming to unify the division, become undisputed at some point, and yeah, it's just excellent to see. To be honest, it's quite often, you see, of course, fighters get a belt, get a title, and then just kind of happily ride along with that title and not actually go into the unification fights, go and try and push for undisputed. But she's doing that, and I like I say, give her a lot of credit to take on perhaps these unknown challenges, these unknown tests. I mean, Shanika Johnson wasn't a massive name. She had that backing, but it wasn't a crazily big name until Scotney was willing to take her on, and she managed to get the win there, which was a great win. But Mea Motu is definitely that unknown talent. She hasn't fought at a crazy high level. I feel like people from Australian fans will know who she is and know the name because of the race and the kind of tempo in which she's on, and the way that she fights, and in general, of course this fight got rescheduled. It's great to see that it's got rescheduled, and it's very much deserved to see that it's gotten rescheduled because of the fact, like I really do, and I really have been saying for quite a few fights now, that Motu deserves this chance to get, a big fight against one of the champions. She's been waiting quite a while, seemingly kind of specifically for Scotney, and this is, I feel like, perfect timing. And, she is perhaps, the older fighter. Perhaps that's going to make a difference, I don't know. But for the most part, I think a lot of sometimes women's fighters as well, you see getting given the opportunity to fight for a world title when perhaps they don't really deserve it. I mean, Scotney fought against Lecker after beating Johnson. It's just such a step down, and quite often you see they'll just go and try and bring up an Argentinian fighter who's fought at a high level a few times, but then also had multiple losses on their record. It's quite regular to see, but it's not so much the case where there's actually a 20-0 fighter waiting there ready. Perhaps she's not been shouting the name enough, but now she's, like I say, finally getting this opportunity. And in general, it's a time in which Australian women's boxing is also doing very well. I mean, like I mentioned, Sky Nicholson is definitely the flag bearer. She's the person who's leading the way and is looking excellent with every single fight. But like I say as well, Shanika Johnson, she's a champion. Robinson has just recently become champion as well in a all Australian affair. So in the rematch, Delcy Robinson, and so that's another name to add to the list. Motu, she could become champion if she wins that fight. That would be 4 Australian women's champions. That would be crazy, to be completely honest, because there's not really been that Australian women's scene that strong before ever. And so it would be amazing to see. I mean, even the men's side isn't that strong. You've got Opataya, you had Zub, he's kind of dropped off a bit from the shock defeat versus Murtazaliev, and so she, could be the 4th women's current world champion. And so, yeah, I'm sure she's going to be fighting, perhaps with that in the back of her mind, but she's, of course, had to go over to the home country of Scotney. Scotney is a Manchester fighter, and, it's interesting to see how she's fighting in Nottingham. It's a strange card, to be completely honest. It's got some good kind of fighters, or one kind of local fighter in the way of Harry Scarf, a Derby fighter fighting Conor Walker. I think that's a great fight. It's just interesting to see why it's in Nottingham. I think Nottingham perhaps has been crying out in recent times for a big event because they've been waiting so long for the Lee Wood fight, and perhaps the stadium fight for Lee Wood, but that hasn't really kind of happened, and Lee Wood's been on the back burner for quite a while, and so Nottingham have been really wanting that big show to have. But this is just an interesting one. It's at the Most Point Arena, which isn't really a massive arena, and Dalton Smith has the capabilities to sell quite a lot of tickets and to sell out in Sheffield, and so it's just, like I say, a strange card to have a world title fight like this on it, and Motu having to come over to Nottingham. It's just interesting to see, to be completely honest. But Scotney, is she far away from a main event? I believe she might be the co-main, if not the fight below the co-main, below that Harry Scarf versus Conor Walker fight, which, to be honest, is a bit of a shame. It feels like perhaps the women's fighters in Matchroom are never really getting put on main event slots. I mean, they've all got big followings. I feel like Sky Nicholson definitely has a big following. They could get put on main event slots. They could all be on one card and be an all women's card and be an excellent show. But Matchroom haven't really ever ventured into doing that. I mean, we see that at the moment with Boxer doing that for a second time with the Jonas versus Price card, but they've also put Price as a headline a couple times, and also Jonas as a headline a couple times as well. And so, it's just interesting to see that she is still not kind of grasping into that, even with all the belts on the line. well, all three belts on the line. It's not being grasped as a main event, but of course, he's got a head coach as Shane McGuigan, a head coach in which he's doing great things at the moment. To be completely honest, I mean, he has Adam Azim, who's doing excellent things and has that fight versus Lipinets coming up. And then he's also got Caroline Dubois, who's also just coming off an excellent, well, draw, but technically victory against Kamara just, I believe, 2 weekends ago now. And then, he has Chris Billum-Smith as well, which is, a bit of an unfortunate one. Him going up, having that test and not being able to come and bring the belts home to the UK, but it was against a very tough test in Zerda Ramirez, and he did make a good account of himself. Lee Cutler as well is kind of a link to amongst that that stable, and he's doing excellent things, just beating Stephen McKenna, and so it's definitely a stable in which is flying at the moment, and so Scotney has that backing behind her, has an excellent coach with her, and yeah, in general, that's just also going to progress her even further. But it's interesting to see how Shane McGuigan kind of only really seemingly has that one matchroom fighter in Scotney. Most of his other fighters, like I mentioned, are all with boxers. So it's just interesting to see when he does venture over to the matchroom side. But of course, this is matchroom's 2 shows in one night. So perhaps this being, like I say, a little bit of a smaller show compared to that of what they're used to, what this fight could have been on. It's, like I say, a bit of a smaller show, not too many big names. I mean, Dalton Smith not fighting that big of a name in Valid Weezer, and then, like I say, Scarf versus Walker, not a huge fight. A good fight, I think it's going to be an entertaining fight, but not a huge fight. And then this one, which I think is a very good fight, but of course isn't getting the attention I feel like it deserves. Matchroom have got that 2 shows in one night, which is definitely a great way to kind of kickstart 2025 for them. Of course, they had the Opataya fights early in January, but this is a great kind of way to put 2 kind of smaller shows. The Pacheco show, which is also an American the same night, isn't a massive show either. But like I said, it's just them kind of flexing that they have the capabilities and the world kind of stable to be able to do that. And yeah, it's credit to them. But to speak about the main event, I suppose it's an interesting contest. Dalton Smith is probably my favourite English fighter at the moment, if not well, he's somebody in which I've followed for a long time now. He's somebody in which I've been to multiple fights for him. I watched him against Sam O'Mason. I watched him against Sam Maxwell. I watched him against Zepeda. He's just an amazing fighter to watch. And every time that I've seemingly gone to watch him, he's gone and got an excellent knockout. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be at this fight, but it's just so amazing to see the progress in which he's made. He's gone from fighting in the kind of matchroom headquarters in 2020 where he was delivering big knockouts to, having a little of a maybe blimp in the road when he fought Billy Allington. It wasn't a loss, but it wasn't an excellent performance by him, no means. And, that was the last time he was out in Nottingham, so perhaps he needs that real big home crowd to really stir him on to get a knockout. I'm not too sure. I feel like he definitely has improved a lot since then, but he's coming off this win versus William Zepeda. It was an excellent fight. Not William Zepeda, Jose Zepeda, my apologies, which was, a great performance from him, to be completely honest. He mastered the range for the most part, mastered his timing, was able to make multiple adjustments. His footwork was excellent. He was able to keep relatively calm, relaxed, picked his shots excellently, and for the most part was probably the most impressive performance, the most one-sided performance we've seen against Jose Zepeda at that point in his career. And fighters like Regis Prograis, who of course ex-world champion, was a world champion at the time, got him out there in I believe 11 rounds. Smith was able to do it in just 5 and by a beautiful body shot as well. And so now I don't know if this is necessarily a step down or not. I mean, Weezer has got himself in this position in line for the European title. This is, of course, for the EBU European and WBC Silver Super Lightweight titles, the vacant EBU title, because of it was meant to be Fernandez in which Smith was going to fight, but Fernandez pulled out, I believe, through no, Smith pulled out through injury, and I don't know why they didn't make Fernandez as another one. I think Fernandez might have moved on. I'm not too sure. I think Fernandez was linked to fight O'Leary at one point, but then that didn't happen. So, like I say, we have this fight instead. Weezer has got himself in this position ready for a European title shot. His record isn't excellent. He's only ever really fought in France. He's, like I say, with the record not being excellent, he's had losses a while ago. I would say, back in 2018, I believe was his last loss, and he had a couple round then which were against lesser opponents, but he's been on a good run, and he's been getting wins which have been picking up little titles here and there. Not really any kind of crazy big wins, no kind of notable names. He went out to Spain and he got a win, which was nice. But I do feel like he's definitely a fighter in which can't be slept on. I feel like he might offer more than that of Jose Zepeda. I think he has that will to win still, and he's going to come with quite strong, aggressive combinations in which he'll try and throw. He's not the most powerful, and his footwork really isn't that amazing, but he definitely can't be slept on because he's definitely going to offer shots. He's definitely going to throw more and be able to fight perhaps at a mid range a bit better, and he's a bit of a bigger target than that of Jose Zepeda as well. And I think that Smith's going to win via TKO in round 9. I don't think he's going to have the problem in which he had last time he was fighting in Nottingham. I think it's going to be a much more complete, well-rounded performance. I think Weezer throws a lot of his shots from quite low down and he doesn't bring them back. He's kind of throwing with his shots quite close to him, kind of elbow type shots, not really the most clean and tidy. I think Smith can definitely find moments to be able to utilize his timing. I think his range management is looking excellent at the moment and his footwork is looking very good. Perhaps there could be possibilities he could get drawn into a fight, but I would like to hope that he and his team, which are an amazing team fighting out of the Steel City gym, are going to be able to drill it into him not to get drawn into a fight. And he Dalton Smith is clearly just such a big fan of boxing. I think his IQ is really, really good. I think he's a very switched on type of fighter. You can see him in the corner, multiple different fighters out of the Steel City gym, really just helping and learning as much as he can. And you don't see a lot of fighters in the corner as much as what he is, but he's just learning so much, as you can tell, and he's improving so much with every single fight he's had. And like I say, I feel like he has been in the past known to overlook opponents like he did versus Allington in Nottingham, but for this one, I feel like I say, he has improved a lot, and he's going to be very locked in not to overlook and perhaps see fights like the Adam Azim fight or other fights that are being talked about with him, perhaps like a Pierce O'Leary fight or like I say other fights, other matchups that could happen. Harlem Eubank is another name. He's got to stay focused, he's got to stay switched on, and then fights will come if he does do that, and I think he will win, like I say, via TKO in round 9. I think he'll be able to land perhaps that power punch, perhaps that one punch type knockout again, or just a well worked attack, and then be able to get him out of there. And now we move back on to the fight in which I'm talking about, and Ellie Scotney versus Mea Motu. And Scotney, as a fighter, I believe she's got a high guard, and a high guard in which she'll catch quite a lot of shots with. I feel like sometimes she can perhaps slow down a little bit. I don't know if she's getting tired or not, because she does fight at a high pace and is typically able to match that high pace throughout the whole round, all the rounds throughout the whole fight. But she does typically fight with a high guard. Sometimes she'll stand in front of you and just cover up and take them shots instead of kind of taking a backward step. But for the most part, she is catching a lot of shots that you will throw. She turns into her punches very nicely. It's nice to see, going to the body very nicely. Similar kind of style to an extent of that of Caroline Dubois. Perhaps that's just what Shane McGuigan is really kind of drilling into his fighters, and it's great to see. She plants her feet well. She goes to the body well. She's like I say, I believe well drilled, and I believe pretty much all of Shane McGuigan's fighters are very well drilled and disciplined, and will listen to what he will say. She can fight at a mid or in close range. She's not greedy with her work. She follows off her jab typically nicely. Perhaps that can again slow down a bit into the later rounds, but into the later rounds, a lot of the time she will overwhelm you with the imposing strikes in which she will offer. She's very much just in your face, being able to impose herself, put that will onto you. She's not been able to get the knockouts that perhaps she's maybe deserved to an extent. She's definitely been able to dominate some fights, and it's been surprising to see that she's not been able to have any knockouts. But for the most part, she is very imposing. She is quite a physical fighter, and is gonna be tough to deal with. Like I say, overwhelming. She's come forwards fighter. She's very good getting her foot inside when she isn't kind of crossing her feet over and standing straight in front of you. She's very good at getting the inside type of foot and then being able to spring her jab through, which is nice. And she will fight at a high pace as well. And I think she is that technically skilled fighter. Perhaps, you'd have to say most definitely more so than that of Motu. Negatives about her, I think she can come in straight on. Like I say, getting her foot in is good, but when she's not really offering too much head movement and kind of standing quite upright in the process, it means she can get caught off balance and perhaps stumble off the foot in which she's just gotten inside, and it means that she can get caught with some shots sometimes doing that. She, like I say, uh, doesn't have the best of head movement. Her footwork speed isn't really anything too crazy either. Handling a high output, I'm not too sure how good she is at actually doing that. I feel like that's where Lefebvre had a bit of success. Lefebvre was definitely more willing to go on the back foot than I believe that Motu will be, and I feel like is a much different fighter to do that of Motu. But when Lefebvre did let her hands go, she did land shots on Scotney. She, like I say, isn't really the best on the back foot, I don't believe, Scotney. She will throw with her opponents at the same time. Often she'll be able to land a much cleaner shot, but quite often she is just willing to throw with her opponents. She's got that physical power, but how much so? Like I said, hasn't been able to get the stoppages or the knockouts in which I personally think she's probably deserved and been unfortunate not to. She's will stay in range. I feel like if she can't get a jab going, then she can be, a little bit frustrated and resort to perhaps getting stuck into a fight. She can take early damage to her face. She looked like she was taking quite a bit of damage early from Lefebvre. Lefebvre isn't really the most powerful of punches either, but Scotney seems to take quite a bit of damage early. She seems quite tense in the movement. It doesn't kind of seem the most fluid and natural. If she can't push you off of her, then she's gonna probably, smother her work perhaps a little bit or get caught with shots in close. And if she isn't able to impose it, if you don't give her that respect on the back foot, then she can just kind of either go in for a head clash or just kind of stand toe to toe. And she does lose her shape a bit. Like I say, for the most part she's very well drilled, but I feel like there is at times where she'll drop her hands and lose her shape a little bit when I believe she may be getting a bit tired or fighting a bit more emotionally. To speak about Motu as a fighter, she's very physical as a fighter. Similarly to that of Scotney, she's definitely going to want to impose herself as well. She plants her feet very well. She's very aggressive with her work. I'd definitely say much more aggressive than that of Scotney. Not as disciplined, not as well drilled, but just being able to fight that intense aggressive type of fight. She's a fast starter, she's relentless, she's in your face, she's going to be very hard to deal with. She carries power, I believe, perhaps more so than that of Scotney, and of course is coming off a stoppage win where she offered some brutal damage onto O'Connell. The swollen head of O'Connell was just crazy, to be completely honest. O'Connell was a very tough fighter who is coming off a win actually versus Jasmine Parr, which was a bit of a surprising one, but also was able to take some big punches from Ebony Bridges and keep coming forwards, but she wasn't able to do that against Motu. Well, she was able to keep coming forwards and take a lot of big shots, but the damage was just way too much. She has a high output, she's hard to control. Like I say, she's explosive in her work. She's often able to find the inside positions well. Perhaps it's kind of forcing away in a bit, but she's definitely able to explode into the in close range. She forces herself onto her front foot. She's probably gonna make you hold her because she's quite hard to contain. She's just in your face so much and so kind of physical that you're just gonna want to hold on because you just can't deal with that. She's tough. She's gonna put her all into her shots, and she'll often lead exchanges as well. She's not gonna fight the opponent's fight. She's gonna fight her fight, and I also believe she's got quite a good chin as well. So Scotney, it's gonna take a lot, and it's gonna be a big statement victory if she was able to stop Motu. Negatives about her, I feel like she will throw often only hooks. I feel like she has a lack of a jab. When she does try and use her jab, it's finding the range of it. At a mid-range, I think she is quite poor, but I just don't know if Scotney's movement is going to be enough to be able to evade that. She leaves herself quite open. She has to be inside. Her accuracy isn't often amazing, and she is often just kind of headhunt swinging at times. But you can tell it's not arm punches, it's putting it all into her shots. She's can be messy at times, and perhaps that goes into her favour a little bit, making the fight that bit more messy. She smothers her work. She can, like I say, not find the range that well. She when she tries to counter, when she tries to fight perhaps a bit more defensively, a bit more on the back foot, it's not excellent. Her timing isn't excellent. She does square up. She's quite a big target when she does square up as well. She ducks her head in, and like I say, in general, she'll headhunt at the same time. So, she's definitely a target there to be hit if you're smart and are able to move really well. Perhaps something like a Leffe Bird might be able to have more success, but I just don't know if Scotney's movement is quite as good to be able to have quite as much defensive success than other fighters might be able to. Scotney is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Motu is going to win via unanimous decision. Like I mentioned, I don't feel like Scotney's footwork is excellent. She'll fight perhaps in and out a little bit, but she could get perhaps drawn into a bit of a fight, or if she is, trying to get in close, trying to get her front foot on the inside, I think Motu's going to capitalise on her and just put it on her, impose herself like nobody has done so far against Scotney. Of course, she's only had the 9 fights professionally, and the wins in which she's had against a high level opposition have been, like I mentioned, against styles much different to that of Motu. I think Motu is going to be the most aggressive fighter she's going to have to deal with, and is going to match the high tempo, match the physicality, and is going to have more power than her. And I think perhaps she's not as technically skilled, and it could be messy, but I believe she's going to win via unanimous decision, cause that shock upset in England, and it's going to be a huge win for Motu. Then who she could go on to fight next? I mean, Romero, Mercado, WBA, WBC champion. They're two, excellent fighters to be honest. And Romero perhaps has shown weaknesses in the game. She's had 2 draws, and one of them being versus Cruz, one of them being versus Rivas, and she hasn't really been able to avenge either of them. And perhaps she could be somebody who may be seen as a bit more of a weaker champion because of that. I don't really know where Motu will go in the way of signing with a promoter. She might sign with Tasman Fighters. She might already have, No Limits Boxing could be an option. Matchroom could be an option. Like I say, there's just multiple different options that could be available, because she would be, if she wins this fight, 3 titles, a 21-0 women's fighter, not many of them around, and so she could get snapped up. Like I mentioned, the Mercado is a fighter WBC champion coming off that Ramla Ali win. Could be a good champion. She's got a great record as well. Hasn't really fought a crazy high level opposition. Ali was probably her biggest name, but that could be a good fight as well. Cruz, I think Cruz would be an amazing fight for Motu, even if she loses this fight, to be completely honest, because Cruz will match that intensity and will match just the pure output of just swinging, and I think it'd be an amazing fight. I don't know how many Cruz has got left in her, but that could be a sensational fight. Or the winner of Gallagher versus Jones, that could be a good fight. Another kind of British fight for Motu to have to deal with. Even if Scotney loses this fight, that fight could still happen. Gallagher versus Jones, well, versus the winner of that versus Scotney, a good kind of all English affair. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.